for one-on-ones later on or anytime. If somebody has a question, we will introduce them in a few minutes. So get settled. There's a little bit of snack still if anybody's hungry. And we're going to get started in a few minutes. Yes? Now. Just about now.
Good evening. Am I the right distance from the mic?
Yes.
Well, good. Good evening and welcome to the first general meeting of Berkeley Tenant Union in way too long. BTU was originally founded in 19... Is somebody can't hear me?
Quiet!
Well, the counselors can counsel. Counseling is over there, by the way. Okay. BTU was founded in 1969, and in a couple of months we're going to have a 50th anniversary meeting, and I hope all of you come to that. It should be fun and informative. We will notify you if you gave us your email address when you came in. Those tenants and their supporters ultimately succeeded in getting rent control for Berkeley, and so we will be eternally grateful to them, particularly people like me who live in a rent-controlled building. And what we want to do is make sure that all the people who do not live under rent control become as secure as those of us who do. Now, Berkeley has some excellent eviction protections for all of you, and that's a good thing. But, as you know, the landlord can always raise the rent if you don't have rent control. And as you know, we keep working to repeal Costa-Hawkins so that we can have rent control for everybody. After a number of years of successful activity, the first BTU stopped for a while. They had done all they intended to do. They resuscitated themselves for a while, but after Costa-Hawkins, and after we got essentially a pro-tenant rent board commission most of the time, because after Costa-Hawkins, the landlords didn't want to spend that much money being on the rent board. They didn't have to anymore. And the BTU kind of died out. A few years ago, I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, we started the BTU again, and for a while it was fairly active. The focus was mainly on city council and enacting Berkeley protections for tenants. We worked on demolition codes so that our rent control buildings are all kind of elderly now because only those built before 1980 are under rent control. And some landlords just like to let them go to hell, and then they claim it would be too expensive to fix them up, and they apply for a demolition order. Well, we have kind of stopped that a little bit, and we're still working on it. But this is not just about people under rent control. We want to be the tenant union for everybody, and that includes our fellow tenants in various kinds of subsidized housing. And there are lots and lots of buildings like that in Berkeley, and I know some of them. Some of them are HUD buildings, some of them are not HUD buildings, and they all have tenant issues, and we're all tenants. Actually, I like the definition of tenant that the LA Tenants Union has created. They say that everyone who is not in charge of and control of their housing is a tenant. That includes those of us who pay rent, people who live with their parents, the homeless, the incarcerated, many people who go to college.
Work.
So, what did you say?
Live, work.
Live, work. Right. So, there's a great many of us who are tenants. Probably if you use that definition, there are far more tenants in the country than there are homeowners. Not that there's anything wrong with homeowners, but sometimes we have different agendas. Okay. We on the steering committee now are dedicated to reactivating our tenants union and uniting Berkeley tenants to action. Although some tenants have more agency over where they live than others, they are still not the ones who ultimately decide if they're going to continue to occupy their home. So even if we're the normal kind of tenant or renter, we still don't have a lot of control. Even under rent control, there are things that can happen to you. Tonight we will be informing you of some of the resources available to you that may help you in your tenancy. We have counselors here to help with immediate problems. But mainly tonight we are here to meet you and introduce ourselves and urge you to join BTU. In later meetings, we will work out what there is to be done and how to go about it. We will continue with your help in emailing, phoning, and showing up at meetings to persuade the council to act in our best interest. We will continue to join with Tenants Together and other statewide organizations to create legislative change. But we also want to be active in our tenant community. We want to keep tenants in their homes. And although we want to work against the Ellis Act and we want to repeal Costa-Hawkins, we also want to offer or find the resources tenants need to feel safe and secure in their homes. We want to keep the stock of rent-controlled apartments safe from demolition. We want all tenants to live in a safe and habitable home for as long as they wish. And this means we need your input. I can't offer you a blueprint tonight of what we're going to do. You're going to have to help with that because this should be everybody's tenant union. Tonight my task is to welcome you, and so I do welcome you here tonight, and I welcome you to join us in all these efforts. And remember, this is a tenant town, and we tenants have a history of creating change. People have forgotten that over the years. It's time to remind them. Thank you. Somebody told me I forgot to introduce myself. Is there anyone who has the nerve not to know who I am?
I don't know who you are.
My name is Julia Cato, and I've recently become the chair of the steering committee of the Berkeley Tenant. Now, I'd like to acknowledge we have some of our elected officials here tonight. I see Ben Bartlett, the councilperson from this district. I'm going to ask him to say a few words, but I just want to acknowledge Igor, who's on the rent board. Many of our steering committee members are on the rent board. Anyone else here tonight?
Paola, John.
I thought that we would introduce you as you spoke.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Now, Ben.
Thank you. So it was the summer of '69, huh?
That's right.
You know,
It's a good summer.
yeah, apparently. Yeah, I want to congratulate you, the BTU, on the relaunch. The relaunch. You know, think about when you were first formed 50 years ago, in '69. That was a time of a great generational shift, unjust war, civil rights conflict. The identity of people was being challenged, and redevelopment was occurring too. So you had this large pushback that placed pressure on affordable communities. Right, that's where the Ashley Park Station is now as a result. Well, a lot of the same forces are at play now. We have a tremendous pressure placed on all tenants and communities like our own. Right now in Alameda County, our county, the last 2 years, we've had a 41% increase in homelessness. And I read a poll recently that said that more than half of all college graduates in the state of Wisconsin intend to move to California. Right? Hey, that's great. It's cool. You know, we've got the good lights. I understand that. Many of us came here as well. But what's happening is that as our forces align to embrace these new people and create these new economies with these new jobs and everything, it's trampling everyone else under. They're not preparing for the future. They're not protecting. You know, I ran for office, you know the story, many of you, because my mother was displaced. I was living my own life, having a good time, and then my 70-something, she's not here, 70-something-year-old mother, she accepted I said her age, was displaced. And she and all of her roommates and friends, this whole building, all kicked out. And they're all retired school teachers. And I was like, what's going on here? I was so shocked. I thought there would be protections, I thought they could do something, and I thought there was senior housing available for them. But there wasn't. So I ran for office to fix that. And this council that I'm a part of has a lot of tenants on it. And we've been working really hard, Tenant Bill of Rights, TOPA, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to tell you though, I'm really frustrated right now because the calls I get from tenant constituents and friends in Berkeley and outside of Berkeley, all begging for help, is through the roof. Landlords not picking up garbage, broken lights, making them feel unwelcome, it's on the lead. The pressure is on so much. We need to change the game. So the same energy you took that you guys had to make rent control and the very first tenant protection in the state, you need to redouble your efforts. We need to end vacancy control. We need to do rent freezes until it's stabilized. You know, the CASA Compact of the state, it's a bunch of state laws coming together. It's supposed to be on three principles that I believe in. Preservation of affordable housing, protection of tenants, and production of new units. But right now, we're losing the two P's on this side. They're only doing production. And so the rent cap, they'll talk about this, I'm sure, when you come here, they're making it harder on our people. So we need to articulate a new vision for tenancy and for apartment dwelling that's stable, that has families too. Not just young people, seniors, families, all of us together. It's super important. So in Berkeley, you have the benefit of a large platform and a large tradition, and this body has a spirit that's 50 years old. So reinvigorate it. Thank you. I'll be with you.
I just quickly want to announce that there's actually tenant counseling going on right now. We have EBCOC here and the Eviction Defense Fund is here. So if anybody has any questions for some people who know about the laws and what their rights are, they're right here, available to speak to you. Woo! Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, our next speaker is Jeffery Carter, who's a longtime tenant attorney, 47 years. Fresh out of Berkeley Law School, he started the Tenant Action Project, which provided counseling and self-help advice for more than 30 years. He was also in Berkeley's favorite rock and roll dance band of the 70s. He still plays with the Musicians Action Group at rallies and demonstrations. I call it the Commie Marching Band. He was active in the first BTU and continues to work with us now. As you tenants not under rent control know all too well, no matter how good your protections, if you're not in a rent control building, a landlord can always get you out by pricing you out. Jeffery is here to tell us about a circuit weapon to keep rents from skyrocketing. Jeffery.
I'm actually an artifact from the museum. Brought out and they drain the formaldehyde every couple of years. So I can tell stories of days gone by, but I'm not going to. This particular secret weapon is most of you don't know about. Before I do that, how many people, when Julie mentioned the Costa-Hawkins bill, how many people don't know what that is in relationship to tenants' rights? Anybody not know what Costa-Hawkins did? Everybody knows, but okay, so I have to go into it. I will tell one factoid based on a little research that I did last year prior to the election to try to repeal Costa-Hawkins. I looked through the statistics of what rent levels were in Berkeley before Costa-Hawkins went into effect in 1999 was when it really came in full effect, the present. And as a result of Costa-Hawkins over the last 20 years, landlords have received over $6 billion of rent from Berkeley tenants that they would not have had or received if Costa-Hawkins hadn't passed. $1 billion. And that's obviously had an effect in pricing most new tenants out of Berkeley, and it's really a problem. The strange little twist that I discovered that is helpful for you or anybody that you know at the moment, anyway, is that as a result of the fires and subsequent floods that began in September and October of 2017, the governors, both Brown and Newsom, have issued a series of what are called emergency declarations or emergency proclamations. Those emergency proclamations, even though they have specified certain counties that have been particularly hit, have been determined to be of statewide effect by the Attorney General, Becerra. He's informed people like the California Apartment House Owners Associations and others. But the effect of the emergency proclamations has been to essentially trigger Penal Code Section 396. And Penal Code 396 is referred to as the anti-gouging code. And it restricts rents throughout the state to no more than 10% per annum. Now, while for people who are already ensconced in rent-controlled apartments in Berkeley or Oakland or San Francisco, that doesn't have much meaning because the rents are not generally going up. You can't if you've got a registered unit. But for everybody else in the state, everyone else in this town, everyone who's in a $4,000 a month 2-bedroom apartment in one of these newer buildings, the rent cannot be increased more than 10%. These emergency declarations have essentially been passed serially, and the one that's currently in effect is through the end of December of this year. And I expect that, unless it's unusual, I expect that there will continue, unfortunately, to be more proclamations of emergency beyond that. So, if you know of anyone, for example, in Berkeley, who has had who's just moved into an apartment, and the rent that's being charged to them is more than 10% beyond what was charged the previous tenant who moved out, they have a right to reclaim those overpayments and demand that the rent be lowered. In other words, these declarations of emergency have an effect of blotting out the Costa-Hawkins bill. And at least for the time being. Now, I've used this multiple times over the last year and a half, and I think I probably saved the tenants that I've counseled, just the letters that I've written to the owners of the property for the relatively few number of people that I actually see, compared to something like East Bay Community Law Center, probably $500,000 in rent. And it's because I present them with one key document that really makes them think about it seriously. Attorney General Becerra in May of last year filed a criminal lawsuit against the landlord in Marin for raising rent more than 10%. And so the Attorney General's office is taking these declarations of emergency very seriously and has recognized that raising rents, particularly when 50,000 units of housing have been lost as a result of the fires. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, that's enough for me, unless anybody has any questions. Yes?
If someone moves into a building, how can they find out how to rent?
If it's a rent-controlled building, the prior rent is registered with the rent board. There's a rental history that you can obtain very easily with the rent board provide that information.
But what if it's not a rent-controlled building? Is there any way
that's a little trickier. You might ask, what do you, that's a little trickier. You could ask, I suppose, say, what was the rent beforehand? But although there's no record necessarily of the rent beforehand in these buildings.
Okay.
All right, I've been told that questions will be dealt with at the end of the brief presentations that are being made. Anyway, thanks for listening and coming.
Our next speaker is Peter Selawsky from the Eviction Defense Center.
He's got some, I'll go.
Okay, we'll skip him till later. Okay. Then we'll have John Selawsky instead.
Right. Greetings all. Thanks for coming tonight. It's a good turnout. We appreciate the turnout, and we appreciate your interest. Let's keep it up. You can't hear?
Yeah, a little louder.
There we go. There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
All right, good. I thought you'd hear me without the mic, but I guess you can't. The room's, the acoustic's a little strange. I'm John Selawsky. I'm on the steering committee of BTU. I am in my second term on the rent board as well. We have done a lot of good work in Berkeley, but we haven't gone far enough in some areas. We have, as Julia mentioned earlier, we've been working on the demolition ordinance. We've been working on tenant protection ordinance. I think Ben mentioned that as well. We've also been working on relocation fees. And for those who don't know, if you are faced with an owner move-in eviction or an Ellis Act eviction, relocation fees are now at a base $15,000. And you should check the rent board for more information on that, because that's important to know as a tenant. People don't often know their rights. You have a right to a relocation fee. And we do have good cause, just cause eviction in this town, and thank goodness in Berkeley. So really the only reason you can get evicted other than criminal activity and non-payment of rent is something like an owner move-in, Ellis Act, demolition, something along those lines. I am going to show you, there's a few copies of these over there. It's the rent board, your rights as a tenant in Berkeley. It applies mostly to rent-controlled tenants, units, but not exclusively, because as I said, the ordinance covers good cause eviction. So if you're facing eviction for any reason, it's a good, check with the rent board, and then check with the East Bay Community Law Center, Eviction Defense Center. There are a lot of resources out there. I also will make a pitch right now. One of the most important things. No, yes? Is that okay? Can you hear it? Okay. It was too loud. I thought it might be. One of the most important things you can do is register and vote your rights as a tenant, because they come up often. And I brought a few registration forms. I have one here. There's a couple over there on the table as well. If anybody is not registered to vote and wishes to be, it's important that we vote for our rights as tenants. It does make a big difference. Homeowners vote. We know that. Statistically, they vote in greater numbers proportionally than tenants. It's important that tenants vote when there are things on the ballot that impact tenants. I'm also going to make a pitch. We have a few of these left, about 10 right now. $20 if anybody wants one. But I'm also going to offer anybody who signs up for a 2-year membership for $40, we'll give you one of these free. You're going to have to take the sizes we have. We don't have extra larges anymore. There's limitation on sizes. If you sign up for a 3-year membership for $50, we'll give you a t-shirt free, okay? Think about it. If you want to join, you'll get a t-shirt. Right now I can't think of anything else. What? Okay, Paola wants me to talk about what the rent board does. The rent board's purview is rent controlled units. What we do is set policy, and also at times, with the 4x4, which is a committee of rent board commissioners and city council and the mayor, we send things on to council and advocate for council to pass things in tenants' interests, to add protections, because we can always add more protections. There are not enough, even in Berkeley. And Berkeley tenants have it, compared to the rest of the state, we have it pretty good here, because we do have protections, but again, we don't have enough. Okay, the rent board is an elected body of 9 people. Every 2 years, 4 or 5 run, depending on the year and how many people are turned out. There's a 2-term limit on the rent board. And as I said, we set policy, we send things on to council, we advocate, and we're trying to add more protections to tenants and tenancies all the time. Our mayor is here, Jesse Arreguin. Hey, Jesse. Thank you. Anybody else come in? I'm going to turn the mic over right now to, who's next, Julia? You want to take it? Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Okay, we have now been visited by our mayor, Jeffery, and he is going to speak to you for a few minutes. Please welcome him.
Well, thank you all for coming. I think this is probably the biggest turnouts we've had in quite some time for a BTU meeting, and I think it's so important. I don't know if people know that the majority of citizens of Berkeley are tenants, but yet we're not as organized as we can be to not only help shape policy on the local level, but on the statewide level. And so while we weren't successful this year in moving forward some pretty critical bills in Sacramento, we need to pick up the torch and work to try to repeal Costa-Hawkins next year and to pass statewide just cause. And it's going to take real grassroots organizing to bring people to Sacramento to fight the enormous amount of money and greed that the landlord lobby is really trying to advance on the statewide level. And just to speak about my own personal experience, I am a long-term rent control tenant, and literally my property is probably a prime property to be bulldozed if Scott Wiener's SB 50 is passed. And so we need to make sure that we balance the production of new housing with strengthening tenant protections, that long-time rent-controlled tenants can remain housed, and that while we are working to increase the production of housing, that we're also not advancing gentrification and displacement. And so I think what we do in Berkeley really matters, not only provide the protections for people in our own community, but to really set a standard that can apply statewide. And so a couple of things I want to update you on. One, the City Council will be voting on June 25th on a recommendation that I put forward to increase the amount of funding for anti-displacement programs. That includes funding for the East Bay Community Law Center and Eviction Defense Center to represent tenants in unlawful detainer cases when you're getting a 3-day notice or a no-fault eviction notice. We provide resources for legal representation, knowing that landlords have a lot of money, a lot of resources, but low-income and even moderate-income tenants don't have the time or don't have the resources to defend themselves and to stay housed. So the City of Berkeley and the Rent Board provide funding right now. It's about close to $300,000 in funding for these nonprofits. I'm proposing that we increase that funding, the city's portion, to $275,000 per agency, which is about $550,000, and that we also fund a what we call an emergency rental assistance program that provides one-time cash grants. If you are facing a 3-day notice that needs, say, $300 or $1,000, we're going to be putting $250,000 into that program, and $100,000 into a flexible housing subsidies pool to help people that are experiencing homelessness have the resources to get off the streets and into permanent housing. So in total, the council will be considering $900,000, close to $1 million, in funding for anti-displacement. It's the biggest investment that Berkeley has ever made in addressing displacement and funding these resources. And I encourage BTU and all BTU members to please write to the City Council to express your support for this critical funding to address the displacement crisis. Second thing I want to update you on is that we are working with the Rent Board and with the East Bay Community Law Center on a Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which would ensure that when a landlord wants to sell a multi-unit property, that the tenants have the right of first refusal to acquire that building collectively or to work with a nonprofit to acquire that building. And we're working on actually trying to put more money into a program that we created called the Small Sites Program, which provides funding for the acquisition of apartment buildings to prevent displacement and to maintain permanent affordability. And then lastly, we're looking at a couple of policies around strengthening our demolition ordinance so that renters can have increased protection when property owners want to demolish existing properties. We're seeing a lot of speculation happening in neighborhoods throughout our community, including here in South Berkeley. We need to make sure that owners who want to build new rental housing, that we make tenants whole in that process. And so we're looking at that policy as well as either amending or repealing the golden duplex exemption to make sure that tenants who live in these golden duplex properties have the same level of protection as other tenants. And so these are some of the things that we're discussing at the 4x4 Joint Committee on Housing. And I'm just so proud to live in Berkeley, to have a rent board, an elected rent board, and to have some pretty strong policies. But we need to do a lot more because we know every single day people are losing their housing, and we need to maintain our economic and cultural diversity. So thank you for being here. Please speak out, and let's agitate, let's organize, not just on the statewide level, but also locally as well. Thank you all very much.
Our next speaker is Paola Laverde. She's on the Rent Board Commission, and she's chair of the Rent Board Commission and steering committee.
Hello everyone. Thank you everyone for being here today. So I'm Paola Laverde. I'm going to be talking to you about the rental housing safety program in Berkeley. And it's really important that everyone know what their rights and what responsibilities are, because you know knowledge is power, and so this is really important. So every July 1st, landlords of all units, not rent control, all units, even 1 and 2 units buildings, they must certify by July 1st of each year that their units meet housing safety standards on a checklist prepared by the city. And in your seats, you may have found this checklist. Now, this page that I provided you is basically what your unit has to be compliant with. It means that a landlord has to make sure that the windows closed, the doors are functioning, that your stove is working, that the air conditioning is working if you have it. All these things that make your house and your unit habitable. Now, the landlord is supposed to provide you a certificate saying that they meet the certification and its safety, and they're supposed to give it to you every July 1st. And they're supposed to keep a copy of this, so when the city comes out to inspect the unit, and the city is trying to implement a 5-year cyclical program, so they're going to be out. They're going to be asking landlords to see their certificates. That's where the issue comes in, because a lot of landlords don't do this. And that's where we have, and a lot of tenants don't know what their rights are in this. So that's why it's really important that you see this. And so there are some exceptions to this rule. So newly constructed rental units are exempt for 5 years after the issuance of a certification of occupancy. Units where tenants refuse consent to allow the landlord to come in or the city to come in to inspect the unit. One of the issues with this is that you are supposed to let your landlord come in and check out what your unit is like to make sure that the fire detector and the CO2 code detector is working. So you have to work with your landlord to make sure that everything's up to snuff, because if you don't let your landlord in, and if you have habitability issues, how are you going to be able to protect your rights? The city has the authority to inspect any housing unit, but it gives priority to units where there are indications of code violations. So, I think as some of you may remember, 5 years ago, maybe it was, we had 6 students die at the apartment building right next to the library. I think they were called Library Gardens, because the balconies were bad. So now, as part of the safety list, we have to check to make sure that our railings are safe. I can tell you, my building, the railing was off, so I've already let my landlord know. But railings are safe. The stairwells where you're walking are safe, that you're not sinking in. So the inspectors will come out if they know there's some code violation. Now, if the city housing inspection takes place and no violations are found, or violations found are cleared up upon re-inspection, the city will issue a certificate of compliance. If violations are found, written notice will be given to the owner and the tenant, and the city will set a time record for compliance and re-inspection. I can tell you that last year, some 400 landlords received liens because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So the city does go after landlords. And so it is really important that you know what your rights are. If you have any questions, you can call the Housing Code Enforcement. And all the city numbers in Berkeley are 981. So it's 981-5444. That's 981-5444. And then you can also email the city at RHSP, that's Rental Housing Safety Program, at cityofberkeley.info. So make sure you exercise your rights. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Matthew Lewis. He's a member of the BTU steering committee, and he's going to speak about tenants and subsidized housing. Matthew.
Am I doing legislative updates, right? Am I doing legislative updates, or am I doing the other one? Okay, great. Sorry, yeah. All right, just wanted to clarify because I was originally only going to be doing one item, but the item we're talking about now is tenants who live in Section 8 project-based housing. I wasn't actually originally going to be the speaker on this item. We're going to have somebody who lives in and organizes these types of buildings, but they didn't want to speak because they were worried about potential retaliation from their landlord, which is something that is an issue in every building. That's why we want to build building associations. It's been a really successful model in other places. It's a big part of how the San Francisco Tenants Union is organized, for instance. What is it? So what is a building association, essentially? Well, you've probably heard of labor unions, where you collectively bargain at your place of work to make sure you have rights, so that you're not completely screwed over by those who have money, be it in the case of labor unions, your boss, or in this case, the corporate landlord. And so the idea of a building association is essentially a tenants union that you can put yourselves together to collectively bargain around that issue, and because there's strength in numbers. So, for instance, if at a very extreme end, if there's a lot of troubles happening, like landlord, refuses to fix broken windows and stuff, you go on a rent strike, and one person does that, they'll just evict you. But if all 100 people in a 100-person building do that, then that's just too costly. They might not be able to afford to go. If it takes 3 months to fix somebody, they might not be able to go 3 months with all 100 people not paying rent. And so that's why a tenant association is so powerful. And so what we're going to talk about is the rights that you have if you live in Section 8 project-based housing. So these rights are specific to that type of building, but you also have, no matter what, in California, you have rights in every type of building, and it's illegal for your landlord to retaliate against you for organizing. They can't raise the rent in response to organizing a tenant association. There are some issues with the law where it's difficult to enforce, and there was a bill that would have strengthened that, but unfortunately it died in the state Senate this year. But you still have those protections. And you have, as I said, you have additional protections if you live in HUD subsidized housing, and those rights are you have the right of tenants to organize. You have the right to establish in Section 8 based housing a tenant association, and landlords have to recognize it. They have to give space for you to be able to meet, and they can't require you to. The landlord can't require you to let them watch your meetings or watch, like, if they have like a building supervisor who lives in the building. They can't say you have to let that person participate and be a spy for them. And tenants as well as organizers. So, like, if you don't live in the building but you want to organize the tenants, you have the right to go, for instance, door to door, distributing leaflets there or in the lobby. To do surveys of tenants, to assist tenants in participating in tenant and organizing, in doing organizing in the building. Other rights include that you have to be, the landlord has to make available the use of community room or other space as appropriate when requested by tenants association for a meeting. Tenant organizer could be somebody who is a tenant in the building or is a non-tenant in the building. Has the right to do those things, and hopefully we can pass a law. Even if we can't get those laws passed at the state level, maybe we can pass those laws at the local level to give us those rights so that we can do that in every building in Berkeley. I think that'd be a really good thing. As I said, those rights I just listed down, those are specifically for HUD buildings, but you still have some rights in every building in California. And if you have questions, EBCLC probably has the answers. You can talk to them. Like if you're having issues, and we really want to, in both HUD and non-HUD buildings, we want to help start forum building associations. We think that that's a really good way to build strength in Berkeley. So that was one of the things that the old Berkeley Tenancy, when the original one did, and it won actually a lot of affordable housing. Folks went on rent strikes, and they converted buildings into affordable housing co-ops. That was something really cool, but it's not necessarily what we're going to do now. It's going to be up to folks. So whether you are or not involved in a building association, ultimately, we're so glad that you're all here. It's going to be a real exciting year working on this and other issues. So yeah, thank you.
Next, we have Peter Selawsky from the Eviction Defense Center. Peter.
No, Peter.
Everyone. So I'm here on fairly short notice. I don't have any prepared remarks, so you'll have to forgive me if I ramble on. I want to start by just putting in a brief word about our services and the services of the East Bay Community Law Center, and actually also to thank the elected officials who are here, because in a lot of ways they're the ones who make the work that we do possible. The Eviction Defense Center is a nonprofit organization based in Oakland. The East Bay Community Law Center over there is right here in South Berkeley. Both of our organizations have been representing tenants through the eviction defense process for decades now. A couple years ago, the Berkeley City Council passed increased funding for our organization so that we can start, both of our organizations can start counseling tenants for virtually any housing issue in the city of Berkeley. And that really is anything and everything from a lockout to the burner on my stove doesn't work, writing a reasonable accommodation letter if you need an accommodation made for your disability, counseling people about their rights with Section 8 or other subsidized housing. One thing we have seen increasingly since we've been expanding our work and providing more holistic services in the past 2 years is a lot of people coming to us with threats from their landlord about buyouts, what's going to happen if you don't take a buyout, and a lot of pressure about on long-term rent-controlled tenants. Our organization and the East Bay Community Law Center are both available now for free consultations on a wide variety of those issues, and I think everything I just mentioned. If you have any problems with your landlord, you should contact the Eviction Defense Center or the East Bay Community Law Center right away. Our services are free. Our number is 510-452-4541. We also have, I'll say it again, 452-4541. We have a hotline for Berkeley tenants only that you can call or text 24 hours a day at 510-693-2775. Since I'm here with the Berkeley Tenants Union, I wanted to say a couple words about, it's 510-693-2775. And now that I've given our little pitch for our two organizations, I wanted to say a couple other things about kind of my sense of what's going on in the city of Berkeley right now and where you all come in. I am in an interesting position. I am in charge of the Berkeley litigation for the Eviction Defense Center. We take on any number of Berkeley issues, and we are often able to get people in our office before something becomes an eviction and deal with it, I think, in a more full scope services way. We are really glad that we're able to do that. And we're also extremely grateful for the support we receive from elected officials in this city, the existence of organizations such as this organization, and the fact that we have such, generally, they're not perfect, but we do have strong eviction control and rent control protections in the city of Berkeley. We have a new tenant protection ordinance now, which I think people are just starting to learn the power of. And so I've been with the Eviction Defense Center for 5 or 6 years now. I see how it goes for people in Berkeley. And then I do general unlawful detainer eviction defense in both Alameda and Contra Costa County. And the thing that always just never ceases to amaze me is how much better the protections are in Berkeley, how many more resources there are than in other cities, and just the much better results people get here than compared to somewhere like Castro Valley or Union City, where they do not have strong tenant protections. At this point, I think the resources, it's not perfect. I think a lot of tenant resources do exist. I think it's really important, though, that people link up and that there is that sort of education and outreach to make sure that people get connected to those organizations. And I think that's where you come in better than anyone. You are all in the community. If you have neighbors who are hearing about buyouts or no-fault evictions, need repairs, whatever it may be, please send them our way or to the East Bay Community Law Center. We would be happy to help out. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a team from the East Bay Community Law Center.
Hello, my name is Fernando. I work with the East Bay Community Law Center, specifically with the Community Economic Justice team. This is my colleague.
I'm Zoe Brown with the housing units. We do unlawful detainer, eviction defense, and litigation related to housing.
So first of all, thank you for having us here. We're excited to be with community and to be with people who are trying to build tenant power here in Berkeley. We would not see it any other way to take part in this community event because we recognize that one, this room, this is where the magic happens. This is where the change occurs. And while we're bound, by legal limitations, I think CEJ, my team, really tries to also uplift the non-legal strategies that are also involved in taking power back in the hands of tenants. Because we know to create a transformative society, to change the conditions that we're presently suffering through, that we need to empower the people that are most impacted. And that's everyone that's here in this room. That's everyone that's not able to be in this room because they're working 2 jobs and they're unable to make ends meet and continue to suffer, whether they have habitability issues or they have anything else that may be ongoing. We recognize the power that's in this room. I've worked with many of the folks in this room. Here Betsy, over here Paola. A lot of people. We're trying to build tenant power here in Berkeley. So what I really see my role here, I'm actually a non-attorney here at the East Bay Community Law Center. So for me, it's about building community power. And I see our work as attorneys, as our attorney teams and our EBCLT team, to really support and uplift the desires of the community. Not for us to propose ideas and force our agendas onto you, but to really support what the ideas are, the democratic ideas that are coming out of the community. because ultimately that's what's going to be transformative, that's what's going to serve your interests, and that's how we're going to produce change here. So CJ, if you don't know about our team, we focus on people-oriented economic development. That's a long way of saying that we support low-income businesses here in Berkeley and Oakland and Alameda County, as well as we focus on the production and preservation side of affordable housing. So we do a lot of policy. The mayor mentioned that we're working on a tenant opportunity to purchase act. That's something that we've been working on since 2015 alongside the mayor, and hopefully now this summer we're able to make it come true. And that can only happen with the support of tenants like you. And honestly, we've been trying to engage with different stakeholders to make sure that the policy that we craft is in your best interest. We don't exactly know everything that goes into, what you may need, what type of supportive services you may need to make that policy work for you. So we go out into community, and I hope that over the next couple of months that we're able to continue to build this relationship with you all, to build a policy that will actually work for the people. I feel like I've been long-winded, but I want to give it over to Zoe here so she can talk about our housing unit.
Yeah, so obviously he's a community organizer. He knows how to rally a crowd. Our housing unit, as I said, we're the litigators, and we do primarily eviction defense. We have a couple of tiers of assistance. We have every Tuesday evening a tenant rights workshop that is staffed by law students. We have a clinical program, and you can come in with any housing issue and get assistance. Also drafting brief letters for habitability issues, for harassment issues, reasonable accommodation issues, discrimination issues. So we have that level of service. You can call our general housing intake line to have a daytime appointment with the housing attorney for issues. Those often for more urgent issues if you are in the middle of an eviction. And then we do full scope representation, including jury trials on eviction cases. And if you do have an eviction case, we are also in court every Wednesday providing limited scope representation for negotiating resolution of your eviction case.
Well, we're almost there. And then of course, we have questions. But our last speaker is, no, we have questions now. You speak after the question. Wrap up is after the question. So, what?
The legislative stuff?
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. We had to shift our agenda around a little bit. Got lost.
Awesome, yeah, so hi folks. I said earlier, the other item I'm doing is legislative updates. I just want to do 2 quick housekeeping things though. One is we have one steering committee member who's not here. I just want to give him some credit. Just County, he actually had an appendectomy like last night, so he was in the hospital today. He's fine, or at least we think so. I know he's at home. He posted on Facebook. So he's fine, but he couldn't be here because of health reasons, so just want to give him a shout out because of all the work he helped us get. And then also, if you haven't, if you either didn't sign in or didn't pay dues yet on your way out, please do so where the computers are. It'll only take a few minutes. That way, we make sure that we can mark you as being here, so we know that you're allowed to vote, and we can also put you on our mailing list. And then, so legislative updates. So I know folks were asked before if they knew what Costa-Hawkins was. Most folks said raise their hands, but there were a few folks who didn't. So Costa-Hawkins is something that's really important to know. So Berkeley and Santa Monica, which incidentally is the only other city that has an elected rent board in the country, and the place I was born, have 2 cities in California with the strongest rent control ordinances. Such good rent control ordinances. Unfortunately, however, in 1995, the state legislature passed a bill known as Costa-Hawkins. And what that does is basically, it doesn't ban rent control, but it guts it. It weakens our rent control ordinance, it overrules it. So it does a few things. The first is that it bans what's called vacancy control. So that means that whenever somebody moves out of a unit, that basically the landlord can reset the rate. And that's really bad inherently, but one reason it's particularly bad for Berkeley is we have a lot of students. So if students are moving out every single year, that means that to some extent it's like students don't have rent control. And that's not technically accurate because we have a lot of the rights that are really important. So don't tell students they don't have rent control, but it's because you don't want them to mistakenly think that they don't have those protections. Like if the landlord refuses to fix a broken AC, they're still entitled to a reduction in their rent. But to a large extent, it's like you don't have rent control for your student. And so that's really important. Unfortunately, some of our current state legislators, including Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, who represents us, they are standing with the corporations against students, against tenants. They support that law, and that's really terrible of them to do that. Other things it does is it bans rent control in anything built after 1995. So Berkeley isn't really able to expand rent control, and not just 1995. It said any city that already had a rent control ordinance, like Berkeley, can't even expand it up to 1995. Our rent control ordinance said 82. Not only can we not cover stuff past 1995, it won't even let us extend from, I think it's 1980, it won't even let us extend from 1980 to 1995. So it punished cities that were proactive about affordable housing. And the fourth thing it did was it banned it in single family homes. So if a company like Blackstone goes and buys up 100 single family homes, they can charge rents whatever they want in single family homes. So it's a terrible, terrible law. Jim Costa, he's now a congressman from the Central Valley. He's a terrible human being. He's a Democrat. I hope somebody runs against him, like AOC did against Joe Crowley. You see Jim Costa, you tell him he's a piece of shit. You tell him to his face. So now, briefly on the updates. So that's just important information you all should know about rent control. That's a really important thing. We have the strongest rent control ordinance until I was about 1 year old. And I see people here who were born after that, so. Yeah, I'm an old person now, right?
Yeah.
All right, so as I said, so the first bill, so unfortunately, because landlords and real estate interests are the strongest corporations in California, they buy the legislature. And so there's only one bill that hasn't died yet in the state legislature system, and that's a bill known as AB 1482. Here's what that bill does. So the bill kept getting watered down. So what it will do right now is basically it would say, okay, landlords are only allowed to raise the rent up to it's going to be 7% of cost of living, 7% plus the cost of living increase. Right. In Berkeley, that's about
3.9.
Yeah, 3.9. We're going to say 3. So basically, they'll be allowed to raise rent up to 10%. What that means is that's going to be a cap. So for instance, if you're someone, and that's going to be a state bill. So if you're living in, say, Orange County, where you're not going to get a rent control ordinance, that's actually to some extent, that's really good. It's a very weak law. Look up, I've done the math, it does not take very long. If you get a 10% rent increase every year, you're going to have your rent double. Yeah, 7 years, exactly, very quickly. So if your rent doubles in 7 years, you're not going to be able to afford to live there. So that's why that bill is really weak. So most folks in Berkeley, if you live in a rent-controlled unit, that's not going to affect you. It doesn't. So it's not going to be Berkeley. They can only raise rent 65% of CPI. So if you're in a rent-controlled unit, so that's a big difference. So if you're in a rent-controlled unit, it's not going to affect you. I still have my much stronger protections. But for folks who are not in rent-controlled units, including those in Berkeley, that's going to be a protection. So if your landlord wanted to raise the rent 20%, that's good for you. Like your rent increase got cut in half, but it's still really weak. It's barely anything. It's also not going to affect landlords who own less than 10 single-family homes. So again, all these little cuts the landlords bought. So that's going to be something good for. It's going to be better than nothing, but it's going to be really weak. So that's kind of the one bill that survived through the state legislature. Really wanted to give you more updates of state legislative updates in the legislature, but unfortunately that's where we are. As I said, real estate industry is the strongest in the country. Even in Big Blue Berkeley, we have corporate Democrats like Buffy Wicks who don't stand with tenants. They're taking all that money from real estate industry, and they'll pay lip service, but they won't do anything for affordable housing. Hopefully we can pass AB 1482. And unfortunately we can't do something at the local level like that because Costa-Hawkins again. We're basically, there's a few tweaks where we can make Berkeley's rent control ordinance stronger, but basically we're at the limit, so we have to repeal Costa-Hawkins. That's what Prop 10 would have done. It would have completely repealed it. And so that's why I wanted to give you all that context. Also, Prop 10, just to be clear, that 10% or that 7% plus CPI, basically 10% cap, it's not going to have vacancy control, just so folks are clear. So again, it'll only be like while you're in that same unit. Now, so locally or statewide, it's kind of depressing, but there's been a lot of really good news regionally. So Oakland just closed loopholes for owner-occupied duplexes and triplexes. Before, it basically was that landlords could, yes, let's give a round of applause for that. So here's what that means. Basically, in Oakland, if you owned a duplex or a triplex, or something with 2 or 3 units, you could move in for just about 90 days, and then you could evict everybody. So those tenants, you could evict them with for no reason, or you just raise the rent to whatever they wanted to basically do a de facto eviction. And so they've now got just cause for eviction protections and rent control protections. That was, I used to have the number in my head because I actually was a canvasser for that a few months ago. But that's really big. So Oakland kind of had a weaker rent control ordinance than us. Now, and so now those folks got those protections. That's really, really good. And then in El Cerrito, they also just passed good cause, as did the city of Alameda. So regionally, folks are getting protections just like us. There's been momentum building. Richmond a few years ago was the first city in 30 or 20 years, I don't remember which one, to pass rent control in California. The momentum is building for tenants in California. Even though the corporations are still winning, we are going to beat them. We're going to throw people like Bucky Wicks out of office. We're going to put in progressive. BTU hasn't made an endorsement this cycle, but I hear Javanka Beckles is running. We endorsed her last time, so hopefully Javanka wins this time, a true tenant advocate. And then regionally it's been good. New York, oh my God. So if you haven't heard, New York State just passed the most amazing tenant protections. They got back vacancy control and so many other things. They won. Tenants just won a ginormous rent package. It passed this past weekend where they won so many things. They won back vacancy control. So that's going to keep rents affordable permanently. That is so amazing. It shows what happens when tenants organize successfully. And we are going to win that. We may not win it this year, but we're going to win that. And that is it. Igor, you have a question? Oh, okay. I will keep it quick.
To what you were saying, we received a request from the first elected official in the nation of Afghani descent. She is also the only member on the Hayward City Council. Tomorrow, the revisions to the Hayward Rent Control Ordinance will finally be unveiled. They include, according to her, tenant protections, finally, rent increases, capping them at 5%, which is a lot better than what they are right now in Hayward. Just cause, protections against discrimination based on income in Section 8, removal of the decontrol process, and much more. And she's asking those of us who are able to come out to Hayward. I guarantee you, it's fun. It's only 18 miles away from here. And from 7 to 10 p.m. at Hayward City Hall is where this will be heard. If you can't make it, you can also email council@hayward-ca.gov, where you can talk to me after the meeting, and I'd be happy to provide you more information about how to make sure that Hayward joins Berkeley and other cities as a place that we can all call home.
Thank you, Igor. And I can encourage. I just wanted to say we're 2 weekends ago for the first time in my life. It was great. And if we get that locally built up, it's important. It shows that tenants are organized. Every win we win, even if it doesn't affect us directly, gets us a win overall. So thank you. Yeah. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna win. We're gonna be like New York. We're going to crush the landlords. Who's with me? Hurrah! Tenant power.
Okay, it's finally time for questions. Do I hear a question? Several people had their hands up earlier. Did they leave? Brett.
I wanted to know if this thing that Jeff told us about applies to live work spaces.
To where?
Live work spaces.
I can't answer that. I don't know.
You asked the question?
Yeah. I will ask him and let you know. How's that?
What about, I heard that SB
gutted it, put an SB 50, and it's back right now in the state senate.
Is it worse than the other one?
No, it's the same bill, as I understand.
It's a 2-year
We
bill.
can fight it again.
Yeah, but it's this election cycle, it's this year.
It's back.
It's not 2 years, it's this year.
Betsy?
I had to step out for a few minutes and may have missed something, but I was curious about the bill that was just rewritten that allows people to form tenant associations, but took out all the language about which we still
It
have the right
failed.
anyway. But there was language. Okay, the whole thing failed.
The whole thing failed.
So,
That's all I-
so when they took out the
29.
language, they took out, the opponents took out all the language related to a rent strike. Does that bill?
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
is the legal status of a rent strike? 'Cause it seemed like a crucial tool.
Well, as long as there's no law against it, well, you can do it.
So,
It's just dangerous because
yeah,
you lose more often.
okay, but that is not, that right is not actually been taken away. It just
No.
is not
Nothing.
beefed up.
Yeah, it's not like, except for kind of philosophically, and nothing, the status quo has not worsened in that area. It's still the same as it was like a year ago. You should talk about turning before you do a rent strike, because like, basically right now you can, and this is not legal advice, but my vague understanding is something along the lines of, if like, you know, the landlord like is refusing to fix windows and won't even give you heat, you can withhold rent, is very vaguely the answer, but unless if you do like one thing wrong, they'll have like, then they can like evict you, like.
I want to add something then, which is Tenants Together, which I'm not a member of yet, I should be, is doing trainings on how to conduct a rent strike. So
Yes,
if
there's
there's
one
any
tomorrow.
information, is it tomorrow?
Yeah.
But they actually can do it if there's enough, and they seem to be able to do it as a webinar
Yeah.
anytime they get enough.
Yeah, and just so folks know, because you're, for folks who aren't as familiar, Tenants Together is a statewide org. It's kind of like an umbrella of tenants unions. So like we're a part of that. Yeah. So if anybody ever hears of something they're not familiar with, like Costa-Hawkins or Ellis Act or Own or Move In or Tenants Together, feel free to ask one of us if it's your first time, or even if it's like your 50th time you're not familiar with the term. Don't feel bad about it. Like everybody starts from somewhere, and it's okay if you don't know the answer. Like we can teach you, and you're always welcome to learn. Yeah, and then give us a question.
I was curious, what do we do to start momentum to change the vacancy control here? Like, how do we start building that momentum to fit that?
Well, we have to repeal Costa-Hawkins.
Statewide. And is New York had to repeal something like that in order to get there?
Yeah, so New York basically, so the way New York is, New York so New York City is kind of interesting because they were only allowed to have rent control because the state authorized them to have rent control in the city, and they also said so that authorization would expire every few years. And what happened basically was, for the longest time, Republicans there controlled the state Senate through kind of gerrymandering and a few other things. Democrats won control of the state Senate with one exception for the first time in decades. And at the same time that happened, a bunch of 7 corporate Democrats were successfully primaried by progressives. And so not only did they win, but they got you have to get ultimately not just a Democratic majority. You have to have an absolute majority of progressives, actual progressives. And so the corporate Democrats who didn't have a primary challenge got scared. They saw, oh wow, people are actually organized. I have to vote for this. And so that's why basically it's kind of basically they kind of did repeal Costa-Hawkins, but the difference was that folks were successful. If Javanka had beat Buffy, or if Javanka beats Buffy this cycle, and again, BTU has not made an endorsement, so I don't want so if somebody so I just want to clarify that. Made an endorsement last time. We have not yet this time. If something like that happens, I think it would send shockwaves. Ideally, we'd get 7 people would be primaried in the state successfully. But that I think is one of the big reasons why. So yeah, we can't do anything for vacancy control unless and until we repeal Costa-Hawkins. It's a statewide law. Berkeley basically can't do anything. They went after us because we were doing the right thing, and they're like, no, we're going to prevent you.
Or at least that part of it has to be repealed. Terry?
I talked to Jeffery when he got here, and when he talked about landlords not being able to
the comment was that after people had to leave the fire areas and couldn't find a place to stay, those that could afford it checked into hotels, which were raising their rates astronomically. I mean, hotels in San Francisco, in Santa Cruz, or San Jose, and they're not supposed to do that. I think you can go to the district attorney, so that's law that you
that was part of the anti-gouging law that the Attorney General set out because of the fires, and it is illegal to raise rates for any services more than 10%. And so that falls exactly. If hotels are raising the rates at more than 10%, then you have to. You can contact the city attorney and file a complaint with them, and hopefully they will, or they would have been able to file a complaint against the establishment.
One more question, anybody? Are we done? You have another question?
I was just going to comment, and I think I'm so glad you guys are launching and building momentum around this organizing tenants in a powerful way to come together, because the only way we're going to make a difference is to come together and really be in numbers and get our heads together. I got an email today saying that the studio apartments at the MacArthur Bar are $3,000. $3,100. So I just wanted to put the comment out as we are looking to develop our BART stations, that we rally together and make sure that we're being a strong voice to advocate for affordable housing, workforce housing for the people in our community, and not let them 100% affordable housing meaning workforce and all down, and not allow them to pull the fast one that they did over in MacArthur Bart. So just, you guys, let's keep working together and building our strength in numbers.
I think this concludes our event. Thank you so much for coming. Everybody learned something. If you haven't joined and would like to, I hope we've persuaded some of you to join by our program. Do you have a question? We're not talking about that tonight. Tell me our next meeting.
Okay, sneak preview, rent freeze. I don't think that might be something that I think in getting that training on rent strikes. Just so people start.
Well, most of us can't do the one tomorrow that Tenant Together is offering, but they'll offer it again. And these are online and on my phone, so they can do them. We'll post them. We'll post them on our website. If you're a member of the BTU, you're a member of Tenants Together, and you're eligible to join these things. So there's another excitement to join. Thanks again for coming. You're a great audience.
Special thanks to Welcome and BTU Overview and Acknowledgement of Guest Julia Cato, BTU Steering. Special guest speakers, Mayor Jesse Arreguin and Councilmember Ben Bartlett. Tenant's secret weapons, Jeffery Carter, tenant attorney, and Peter Selawsky, Eviction Defense Center. Berkeley Rent Board Services and Tenants' Rights, John Selawsky, Berkeley Rent Board Commissioner and BTU Steering Committee. Landlord, Schedule A Form, Paola Laverde, Berkeley Rent Board Commissioner, Chair, and BTU Steering Committee. Tenants in Subsidized Housing, Matthew Lewis, BTU Steering Committee. Explanation of Counseling Services, East Bay Community Law Center, and Eviction Defense Center. Video by Christine Schwartz, former BTU Steering Committee member, BTU member, and volunteer community videographer.